Hello and welcome to Southeastern 16. I'm your host, Chris Lee, joined by Blake Lovell, Max Barr. Today, we will be previewing and predicting the outcome of Duke and Alabama in the Elite Eight. You can catch that 7:49 Saturday night on TBS or True TV if you're watching. Both these teams had very impressive performances to get here in the round of 16. Max Barr, start us off. What catches your eye between Duke and Alabama?
First one to 170 wins. This is going to be a fun one. No, jokes aside, quick update here with the betting splits. While Florida is as lopsided as it gets, this is the complete opposite. There is no split bets handle anything that is larger that deviates more than 10% from 50%. This is all the money is dead even. People cannot decide. Do I want to ride the Dukies and Cooper Flagg? But Alabama just looked unbeatable, making all those threes. Which team do I choose? The pro money doesn't know. Pretty even. This is going to be a tough game to pick, guys.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this is my kind of game right here. When you talk about just absolute points, I think you're going to get quite a few of them. I know Duke is very good defensively, but again, I think we need to give a little bit more credit to Alabama too. Yeah, this isn't the Alabama team of last year in terms of their defensive numbers. They have been much better this season in that regard. Yes, they've still had some games where they've given up points, and I know you can say, well, they give up 88 to BYU or whatever, but still, I mean, they've done a really good job in a lot of areas defensively, honestly, outside of maybe just forcing turnovers. But I mean, I don't think that's a huge surprise. That's kind of been the story all season long. So I think that's kind of one of the more interesting things to me. Anytime we're talking about this Duke team, it's how do you defend them because they're just so good in a lot of areas. I mean, I think that's really what it comes down to. You know how well they can shoot the ball. But again, we know that if Alabama gets the looks they got against BYU, how well they can shoot the ball too. And that's the thing, right? I don't know if they're going to get the exact same looks that they got against BYU. And so it will be a little bit tougher. They're going to need to get to the free throw line, I think, in a game like this. I don't think it's just going to be, hey, we're going to make 25 threes and we're marching on. Like, they're going to have to find ways, I think, to do what Alabama does in terms of, all right, we're going to take the threes if they're there, but if not, we're going to drive it to the rim and we're going to try to make plays. Like, that's where I think this game will be decided probably. And so you couldn't ask for a better Elite Eight type setup, in my opinion, than this, just because these are two teams that, you know, if we looked up and said, all right, this is your national championship game, none of us would be surprised by that.
Yeah, I think that Duke has been a lot of people's favorite to win the tournament since before the tournament and even now, and probably rightfully so. I would push back and say I would put Florida and maybe Houston in that conversation too. But the problem is the last thing we saw, and we pointed it out in the previews, there's a night where Alabama can shoot a lot of threes and hit a ton of them. And boy, did we see that, you know, last time out. You've read the box scores. You've heard the stories. I thought the best way to sum it up was somebody in our chat post game said Alabama just hit another three from the drive through at Whataburger. That kind of sums up what they did. And I'm very curious how that outcome is maybe affected the money and maybe how it affects whether you're looking at games. Look, Alabama's not going to do that again. But you get close, and
we said that after Mississippi State too.
Well, that's true.
I mean,
and maybe that's fair. Where you guys go with that, where you want to go. I'm just going to throw it out there.
No, I think there's something to that, but you'd also be foolish to say like they can't do it again because they can. They definitely can. But it would
maybe
be
not 25, but
I know. Yeah. But they can hit a lighted up night where hitting around 15 threes. I think they're going to have to in a game like this. Duke is, and it's crazy to say, Duke's probably the most underrated team in the nation, and that's saying something. They got a horrible reputation just from the ACC. I mean, guys, this is the #1 offense in the history of KenPom, one of the best overall ratings in the history of KenPom, one of the best individual seasons in the history of KenPom from Cooper Flagg, and they're the tallest team in the country, number 1 in average height. I mean, they are as legit as it gets. The thing that I'm looking for here, diving into the matchup, though, is going to be pace, because you can break down all the individual matchups. Who's Phylon going to be guarding? He's kind of been the guard your best offensive guard kind of guy. Phylon being on Richie Saunders' last game to start. But it's the pace. Clear difference in pace. Duke, defensively, dead last in the entire nation in pace defensively, averaging 19.1 seconds per possession, where Alabama offensively is 4th in the nation in pace, averaging 14.9 seconds per possession. Can Alabama get out and run and speed Duke up, something that not a lot of ACC teams had success at, only a few games over 70 possessions for the Dukies, or does this get slogged down into the hard-nosed physical half-court game that Duke kind of wants it to be? Whoever gets out and plays their pace, huge factor for this game off the bat.
Here's a question. I got a couple questions, actually. VSiN's preview has a good, I think, a note on this, which I think is kind of interesting. Duke shot 61% from 2 against Arizona, shot 58% from 3, 85% from the free throw line. They won by 7. Arizona was 12 of 26 from 3, had 12 offensive rebounds. So, like, I look at it, I'm like, these are some of the things that Alabama could do, right? Better maybe than Arizona. And again, Duke was just lights out. I mean, they were just, and it was still, a little bit too close for comfort at the end, right? In terms of the way the game finished. I don't think there is a direct answer here in terms of like the team. If you had to pick another team that's left in this tournament that mostly closest to Duke in terms of the way they resemble their play and just overall makeup, who would that be?
Florida.
That's where my head went, maybe. Yeah.
Okay. What's the team that's given Alabama the most fits in recent years? Florida, right?
Yep.
So again, it's not a direct comp, but you can see both ways here. How, all right, you can say, listen, Alabama is the kind of team that can probably do some of the things that Arizona did even better. Now, keep in mind, Duke was up 19 in the second half, but that's kind of the point, though, right? Like, it was 70-51 with 13 minutes left. Arizona gets to 93 points still. So, like, they kept managing to score and score and score. And I know a little bit of that is like, hey, come on. Like, you got a big lead. Sometimes it happens. Team gets hot, all that. But Alabama can get hot anytime. It doesn't matter. We saw that in the first game. And so I think it's kind of interesting to look at it from both perspectives here and say there are clearly some things that Alabama can do because of their scoring prowess to keep up here and potentially, this be an all-time classic just because of the two high-octane teams in terms of their scoring potential. But I think you can also see some of the things where you're like, if Alabama is to be taken down a notch here and where it just may be a team that's just simply going to come in and just, the three-point barrage or just the scoring potential. I think Duke, has some of that we saw with Florida from a matchup standpoint that can make it tough. So it's such a fascinating one here to me when you look at it from both standpoints.
The more I think through it, I think the X factor in this game is Mark Sears. He's number 7 in KenPom's Player of the Year awards after the BYU game. He was KenPom MVP in that, 10 of 16 from 3. He's been the KenPom MVP in 2 of their 3 tournament games so far, the exception being St. Mary's. And he's been great more often than not lately. But we've also seen times where he, was pulled himself from a game. 9 points against Florida, 9 points against Auburn. One of those they lost, one of those they won. The variability with Mark Sears this year has been greater than it was a year ago. And again, the upside of that just most recently on display. But to me, if you're picking one player, that's the guy, I think.
If I can flip that to Duke, I think their player that, I'll tell you why, but come on Malawash. when he is on the floor, and now I know they just got Malik Brown back, who is one of the best, most underrated big men in the country, especially defensively with his hands. And they can bring in Gogba, the freshman. But when Maluash is out there compared to when he's not, it's a massive difference. You can see it, you can feel it, but it shows up on the stat sheet. Maluash, when he's in foul trouble, they struggle a lot more than when he's able to play the full game. Yeah, they fouled out in that Clemson game, only 20 minutes, had a tough time dealing with the physicality. If there's one thing Alabama can do, it is just be a non-stop aggressor on drives, kickouts, redrive, offensive rebounds. Bodies are hitting the floor. They just, Cliff picks up his second foul. Here comes in Aiden Sherrill. There's Mo D. There's Jaron Steve, Granite, you name it. If Alabama is able to get some chinks in the armor and start axing them down, I think it starts with getting Maluash in foul trouble, would make opening up the rim a lot easier. Just Alabama's aggressiveness, something to watch.
All right, picks.
Well, I got one more thing, because Max, when you went there, I didn't think that was the guy you were going to name. I thought it was going to be Tyrese Proctor, because he's been unconscious from 3 lately. He was 7 of 8 against Baylor, 6 of 8 against Mount St. Mary's. Before that, in the ACC tournament title game, 6 of 14 against Louisville. But let's go back to 2 games before that. I know the North Carolina game was different because of the Flagg injury, but he's 0 of 5. Carolina takes them down to the last possession. Before that, Georgia Tech, 0 of 5. They win that one 78-70 against a very average Georgia Tech team. So keep an eye on that one too, because when Proctor is shooting lights out, it's kind of like what Sears did with Alabama. They can just run away from people. But when he's not, there's been some recent instances where they've been more mortal.
Yeah, it's such an interesting game because both teams have the offenses to just, hey, any given day, any given night, they can get hot and just outscore you, and there's really nothing you can do about it. Both offenses have the capability to do that. For my pick, though, I'm going to go with Duke. I think defensively, there's too much rim protection there between Flagg and Maluash. Now, like I said, if you get one of those rim protectors in foul trouble, the whole tone of the game shifts. And I think in game, say Duke has a lead a little bit. Second half, maybe it's 8 points, 6 points. Maluash gets a 3rd foul. Maluash gets a 4th foul, something like that. I'm telling you, you're going to feel the momentum of this game turn on its head. So watch out for that. I'm going to go Duke here with a pick. But, man, the betting splits are dead even, and no clue where this one's going to go, to be honest.
Well, credit to whichever one of you mentioned the defensive pace, because that sent me kind of scrambling. My claim all year is Alabama's been kind of tempo proof, and which got me to looking at how Duke did in higher tempo games. First loss of the season, they lose to Kentucky 77-72 in a high tempo game, but that was when Duke was just getting used to playing basketball together. You look down the ACC schedule, they dictated the pace pretty much every game. They had about 20-something games in a row where a game didn't get into the 70s. Finally, they had that weird game against Illinois where pace got into the 70s. They won that one 110-67. Miami, 71 possession game. Right after that, they win that one 97-60. Florida State, right after that, 71 possession game. Win that one 165. Wake Forest, 70 possession game. They won that one 93-60. Point I'm making here is I think my best hope for Alabama is if that pace gives Duke a problem, that tells me Duke learned to play at whatever pace was in front of it, and not only to win but to thrive and get better. That and its ability to get defensive stops is why I'll take Duke.
No, and in fairness to Alabama, none of those teams you mentioned are even on the same stratosphere, in my opinion, to Alabama. But I get the point, and it does make sense. And I'll tell you this, we can't underestimate the fact, too, that the Alabama staff had 2 extra hours to prepare for Duke because Nate Oates had already spoiled who was going to win the game right afterwards when he said we're getting ready for Duke right before the Arizona game. But in all seriousness, I think this is one where because we just saw Alabama do what they did, anything is possible here because I mean, like you mentioned, Chris, like even the Mark Sears angle of this, where it is this guy came in, whatever, 5 of 35, 9 of 44 from three, and then he just goes off for 10 of 16. Alabama is always capable of doing, and I truly don't even think the opponent matters. It's just the way they play. They're always able to do that. But there was not a lot of resistance there, I think, from BYU in that regard. I do tend to think there will be a little bit more resistance from Duke here. And again, let's just call it what it is. We've seen Alabama play some of these high-scoring games this season, whether it is the games against Florida, the first Auburn game, the Missouri game. There's been a lot of those, right? Like even the Kentucky games and so forth. You would fully expect this to be the same, right? I think we'd all be shocked that this final is 80-78. I think it's going to be much higher than that. And if you're looking at it from Alabama's standpoint, they got a guy who can do what Caleb Love just did, right? Just completely go off, make it a close game, and all that. So I am going to do a favor for one Michael Southern on Twitter, and I'm going to give him exactly what he wants here. And I'm going to pick Duke.
Well done, sir.
Nice.
Bracket bids.
Perfect execution.
Bracket bids, visit them. They've been great to us here over the past couple months during the stretch run of college basketball season. I hope you're enjoying the free pick'em contest, the auction draft league, all that fun stuff. So be sure to download the Bracket Bids app today or visit them at bracketbids.com.
All right, we'll recap it when it's over. Best way to get it, hit the subscribe button, enable your notifications. For Max Barr, Blake Lovell, I'm Chris Lee, host here at Southeastern 16. God bless you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.